Hello and welcome to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name is Dylan Jackson. Today I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, how you doing today?
Doing well. We've kind of gotten away from week one's bad output from our Carolina Panthers, so I'm hopeful this week. Right, we always beat the Falcon or the Cardinals, so I'm hopeful, and hopefully some of that positivity can rub off on today's episode.
There's a lot of good memories for the Carolina Panthers playing the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, last year in overtime, when you have the 2015 conference championship game, which was super fun. I was at that game. Electric atmosphere. You have the Cam Newton "I'm back."
hmm
But yeah, it's been a good time to be a Panthers fan, at least against the Cardinals. I mean, I guess you can't really say that at any point else in the calendar, but we've got a really interesting slate of games this week. We're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into the 2 point conversions, top 10 rankings, which is going to be a weekly series. I don't think we covered the top 10 last week, the preseason list that we had. But we're going to do that. We're going to pick 3 games each that look interesting from the slate. And then we're going to get into our takes of the week, and then we'll grade each take accordingly. You can follow the show at 2p_conversion on Twitter. You can follow the Substack at 2pointconversion.com. You can follow the show on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. Jacob at Jacob LaQuire, myself at dj.png. Jacob, do you have anything you want to plug before we get into it?
I think since we're coming up on week 3 of the college football season, I'm going to start doing like quarterly draft boards or quarterly reports on how I'm looking at all the prospects. So keep your eye out for following, or I guess next week, some college football draft related articles.
That's crazy that it's already like almost a quarter of the college football regular season. I wrote about Cam Ward on Monday night. He performed, I think, actually pretty well. I was very enthusiastic about the film that he put on. So check that out at 2pointconversion.com if you have not already. Let's go ahead and get into the 2 point conversion top 10 teams. And this is a weekly series that we're going to be kind of maintaining. We'll talk about it on the podcast. There will be written articles about it. Essentially, everybody on the 2 point conversion staff convenes. We rank our top 15 teams, and then an average is taken of those teams to rank as a top 10 conglomerate. So I'm just going to read off the list of teams, and then we'll talk about kind of some notable jumps, some teams that fell, the first team out, and go from there. So the list goes as follows: at number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles; at number 2, the Buffalo Bills; at number 3, the Green Bay Packers; at number 4, the Baltimore Ravens; at number 5, the Kansas City Chiefs; at number 6, the Denver Broncos; at number 7, the LA Chargers; at number 8, the Washington Commanders; at number 9, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers; and at number 10, we have the LA Rams. The first team out is the Detroit Lions. Jacob, what are your immediate takeaways from the brand new week 2 point conversion top 10?
Well, my first takeaway is I can't believe you and the rest of the guys, other than me, didn't put Pittsburgh in your top 10 and thus weighed him out of the official list here. I'm really high on Pittsburgh after week 1, so I'm going to be rooting for them until they prove me otherwise. But our collective list, I think it's pretty good, right? The Eagles, despite maybe a rocky post Lightning performance on Thursday, they're still the number 1 team because they just won the Super Bowl. They took care of business in a division game. I like the Bills being number 2 because they beat what I believe to be the best team in football. It might have been like a fluky win at the end, but they still got that win. And that's going to give them a big tiebreaker advantage, I think, for playoff implications. And then number 3, the Green Bay Packers. This is the team that I think is my favorite in the NFC right now. They destroyed the Lions on Sunday last weekend. I think they're only going to continue to improve as Micah Parsons gets healthy. They didn't even really integrate Matthew Golden into the game plan at a really high touch count, a really high level. He didn't do a ton there. So once they get him more involved, I think the offense can be even better. I like the list as a whole. I like 5, 6, and 7 being AFC West teams with the Chiefs, Broncos,
Yeah.
and Chargers. I think I'm gonna look at my list here because, yeah, I had them in that order, on my list as well. Despite the Chargers winning, I do think the Chiefs, deserve the benefit of the doubt. They played them pretty close, and they didn't have Xavier Worthy for all but 3 plays, and they didn't have Rashee Rice. I think they will be better as the season goes on, but they maybe deserve to get knocked down a little bit. I think they were higher, last week on our preseason list. And then I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being there. I think they weren't there they weren't on the list last weekend. I think they took care of business, and they have a pretty interesting matchup on Monday Night Football that we'll talk about later in the episode.
So I do want to push back. I did have the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 8. Um, I'm right in line with you on the Green Bay Packers. I think they should probably be the favorites in the NFC. I can't quite rank them above Philly until either like Philly wins or Green Bay beats Philly, which I don't think they play this year. I could be very wrong about that. But I'm super high on the Packers. Those two teams are number 1 and number 2 on my list. Yeah, I had Kansas City one spot above Denver. I had the LA Chargers at number 9. Um, I think you and I have been kind of leading the charge with the Denver Broncos hype quite a bit. And while I think Bo Nix, um, I think it's fair to say he disappointed in Week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. He had like 3 or 4 turnovers, not what you wanted to see, but the Broncos still put up 20 points. I think, in spite of Bo Nix, still looked very competent. They looked in control of the game at any point. I think it was a very solid win, even if it was only against the Titans. They're number 6 on the list, which is quite the jump. They were not in the top 10 last week. All the new teams actually were the Broncos at 6, the Chargers at 7, the Buccaneers at number 9, and the Rams at number 10. Meanwhile, the Vikings, Lions, 49ers, and Texans all dropped out of the rankings. So um, the Bills are, I think, the consensus number 2 team right now after their pretty big statement win against the Baltimore Ravens, comeback win as well. Steve was the only one to have them ranked number 1, though. So do you want to go ahead and read off your list for everybody?
Yeah, I can do that. So I had Philadelphia 1, Green Bay Packers 2, Buffalo 3, Baltimore 4, Kansas City Chiefs 5, Denver Broncos 6th. I had Pittsburgh at 7th, so that was my Pittsburgh love there. Tampa Bay at 8th, the Washington Commanders at 9, and the LA Chargers at 10. My first team out was the Rams. I thought the Rams took care of business, but I don't think they were as inspiring as some of the other teams that I listed off there in that 6 to 10 group.
I had a very similar list to you, actually. I think the top 6 teams we each had identical. Number 1, Philly. Number 2, Green Bay. Number 3, Buffalo. Number 4, Baltimore. Number 5, Kansas City. Number 6, Denver. My last 4 in was just slightly different. I had Washington at 7. I had Pittsburgh at number 8. The Chargers at 9, and then the Minnesota Vikings at 10. Even though they did struggle quite a bit for the first, let's call it 35 minutes against the Chicago Bears on Monday night. So um, I think that's kind of all we have to cover with this top 10 list. I think it's going to be fun to track who's in, who's out, who's kind of on the border here. I think it's interesting that with one loss against a team that everybody has within their top 5, the Detroit Lions are no longer in the top 10.
Yes, and they are, if I'm looking at this right, they're within the top 12 for all of us. It just averaged out that they got to 11, I believe. I'm
Yeah.
looking at some of the like 15th team for a lot of us. I had the Jets as my 15th team. I think San Francisco for you and Steve, and then Cincinnati and Indianapolis also snuck in there as well. I think there's a pretty defined, we can say like top 13 ish right now. And then there's a group right there that they're all fighting for spots. Like Indianapolis, I don't think anybody expected them to play that well on Sunday, and maybe they can be a
Yeah.
team that continues to move up if almost a Trevor Lawrence, if Daniel Jones can be consistent like that.
Yeah, it'll be. I think it's interesting to see who everybody has on the fringes. Like I see a Colts mentioned by one of our contributors here. The Bengals, obviously, the Cowboys got to mention. Houston's kind of on the border for I think most of us right now.
Mhm.
After their, it didn't look very pretty against the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday, but we're gonna continue to track this weekly throughout the season. And I think it'll be a fun way to kind of take a consensus of or temperature check, really, of how things are going. So, with that, we're going to move on to our week 2 preview. So, we each picked 3 games that we thought would be interesting to watch. I'll let you go ahead and tell your first game.
So one of those fringe teams within like 14 through 16 that we just talked about were the Cincinnati Bengals. And they have an interesting game this week. They're going to be hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got a win at the courtesy of our Carolina Panthers on Sunday. I think this is going to be a really fun game. There's potentials for it to be like an offensive shootout, like a lot of fireworks. I think Trevor Lawrence didn't have the best passing day, but I think he has potential to be better, despite the or not the Colts, the Bengals defense being a bit more aggressive in terms of getting pressure. I think he can do better against the Bengals secondary. I think this is going to be a receiver's game, right? Jamar Chase needs to bounce back from last week. T. Higgins barely got involved. Brian Thomas had 1 catch, I believe, and then he also had the end around touchdown. And then Travis Hunter, they were targeting him early and often, but he was limited basically on a lot of underneath stuff. I think there's potential for all 4 of the main receivers in this game to put up big fantasy performances and big like real life numbers performances if this turns into a shootout.
And I really hope so from a fantasy perspective because I don't think there was a single skill position player that reached 30 points in just standard PPR scoring, which I can't even remember the last time that happened. But obviously, there's a lot of potential for fireworks here. Both of these defenses are not good. Um, I think that I lean Cincinnati just because you have so much more experience and proof of concept between Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. But I mean, the Jaguars had it looked very put together in Week 1 against Carolina, and that might be more of an indictment on the current state of the Carolina Panthers. But Trevor Lawrence, we'll see if he can improve. He had a few sprays, especially in the second half of that game. Um, I think he was pretty inaccurate, honestly, which is tough to see when you have Brian Thomas, you have Travis Hunter, even Brenton Strange looked really, really good against Carolina. But yeah, this feels like a 37-31 type of game, um, where whoever has the ball last is going to end up winning. But super, super exciting.
Yeah, and like for the Bengals' sake, I hope it's high scoring because even though they won on Sunday, it was a 17-16 affair. And I think the Browns missed a field goal and an extra point in that one, if I'm not mistaken. So they could have won that game, but Cincinnati barely scrapes by. We talk about one of the big things with the Bengals being they have to get off to quicker starts if they want to be a playoff team. I can't think of a better way for them to put themselves in that playoff contention than beating 2 teams that theoretically they are supposed to beat. I know it was in Cleveland last week, but I mean, it's the Cleveland Browns. And then they're favored by 3.5, and it is in Cincinnati this week. Trey Hendrickson should have some of the rust knocked off. I think the Bengals should win this one. But like you said, Jacksonville looked very well put together. Liam Cohen was the only rookie head coach to get a win in week 1 this year. So it should be a tough matchup for both teams.
One thing to watch, I think, is going to be the trenches battle between the Bengals offensive line and the Jaguars defensive line, or excuse me, I guess the other way around. The Bengals offensive line and the no, I had it incorrect. It's the Jaguars offensive line versus the Bengals defensive line, where you have Trey Hendrickson, who didn't really participate in training camp. You have Shamar Stewart, who I think was actually really interesting in Week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. I think he looked. Um, I think he was the best rookie defensive lineman in that game between he and Mason Graham, at least from what I saw. And you have a Jags offensive line that allowed 5 total pressures against the Panthers. And again, it's Carolina. Their two starting edge rushers are Patrick Jones and DJ Wanham, who most people don't even know who those guys are. Um, but if they can continue to stack solid outings as a unit, then it can really, I think, work to a benefit to make the Jaguars maybe a contender in the AFC South if Houston kind of continues to struggle against these teams that they have early in the season.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll talk more about Houston later, but it's an opportunity for the Jags for sure to take a pretty early lead. Well, I mean, the Colts too have an opportunity as well, but I think they're against a much tougher opponent in the Denver Broncos.
For sure. So, my first game that I had that I want to talk about is the Buffalo Bills, who are favored at the Jets by 6.5 points. It's in the early window on Sunday. I kind of think that the Jets are just like fun to watch. At least week one was, and I think that there's an argument to be made that the Bills defense is like, a few steps down from what the Steelers defense is. So I'm going to be looking for Justin Fields if he can stack 2 really solid performances in a row. I was super impressed at his pocket management and his ability to kind of stick in the pocket and make throws that he hasn't really shown before. The Jets' run game, along with Fields, Brees Hall looked great. Braylon Allen had a few solid moments. Um, we'll see how explosive it can be if they maintain it. And obviously, Josh Allen, after that first game, continuing just his MVP level play. Um, I'll be interested to watch his connection with Keon Coleman, who really broke out in a big way in that fourth quarter on Sunday night. If he can really become like that true number one target for this Bills team, then I think that gives them an element, especially with his skills after the catch, that Bills team could definitely use. It's going to be just, I think, elite red zone football, and I feel every time that they're going to show this game, it's going to be some sort of big chunk play or touchdown happening.
It's a league pass game for sure. You mentioned how the Bills defense probably presents less of a threat than the Steelers defense does for the Jets to score points, and I agree with that. But on the flip side, the Bills offense should be more potent than what the Steelers offense was. I like Joe
Sure.
Brady as a coordinator. Obviously, Josh Allen is at the peak of his game right now, and I know Aaron Rodgers turned back the clock a little bit, but I don't think he's going to perform as well as Josh Allen can perform. The Bills always seem to be iffy against the first Jets game that they play. It's like a weird thing that's happened over the past couple of years. So this one could be close, but I want to see how the Jets defense actually performs because I think that it's a bit of a letdown to have the Steelers offense put up 4 touchdowns on you, especially when you have a lot of talent on that defense, in particular on the defensive line. I want to see how they're going to be able to contain the Bills run game because the run game helped drive that win early in the game, and then obviously Josh Allen went nuclear. But adding Harrison Phillips a couple of weeks ago before the season started, I want to see how he and the rest of that defensive line can contain not only James Cook but some of the Josh Allen interior stuff as well.
I think that that's a great point that the Bills' offense is just genuinely much more explosive, much more potent. James Cook, obviously a significantly better running back and maybe even a better skill player overall than anybody on the Steelers' offense. And I think the overall supporting cast around Josh Allen is just better than what the Steelers have around Aaron Rodgers. And we were talking about it with Evan, our writer, today, but he is not super optimistic about what Brandon Stevens has brought to this Jets defense so far. He went as far to say as like anybody that's going against Brandon Stevens is going to have a chance. So, not super enthusiastic from him. on a certain member of the Jets defense, but I still think it's going to be just fireworks, assuming the Jets can kind of maintain the offensive consistency. I really, really like what their new offensive coordinator, I believe it's Tanner Engstrand, has done so far.
Yeah, if Fields can maintain his ability as a passer like he did in that Steelers game, I think it's going to open a lot of eyes, especially when his Chicago Bears counterpart, Caleb Williams, was like spraying passes all over the field in prime time on Monday. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as the season goes on.
Speaking of Caleb Williams, let's get to your next game.
Yeah, so Chicago is going to be going to Detroit. It's going to be Ben Johnson's return to the place where he made the name for himself. And I think this is a very interesting game in terms of long season implications. Both of these teams are in the same division. They actually both played division games in week one, and they both lost those games. Chicago was in control of the Minnesota game for the majority of the game, but like we said, Caleb Williams didn't perform at a very high level, and JJ McCarthy came along in the fourth quarter. You have to you have to give him credit now that he won NFC Player of the Week. Apparently,
That was
um,
crazy.
yeah, he was genuinely like to a level bad the first 2.5 quarters, but he turned it around, and so I guess that's what got him the award. And then on the Detroit Lions side, they just looked rough as well. The Packers were able to do whatever they wanted, both on offense and defense. Both these teams are 0-1 in the division. Obviously, the loser of this game is going to be 0-2. And if they're 0-2 to start the year in the division, I think it's going to be very, very tough for them to have a chance to win the division late in the season, even if there are teams that like have similar wins, like the Lions and Vikings did last year. If the Lions limp into the last quarter of the season at like 2-2 in the division, that's going to be a bad look for teams that are like 4-0 or 3-1 compared to them. So this has a lot of implications for both of these teams if they want to make the playoffs. I think the quarterbacks have, or they're going to have to improve as well. Jared Goff didn't look great with the new coordinator, and I hate to belabor the point about Caleb Williams, but he didn't look like a Ben Johnson quarterback, or at least what we saw from Jared Goff. So I think whatever quarterback bounces back and improves the most probably has the highest chance to win this game. I weirdly feel better about Chicago, even though I think Detroit has the better roster, because Chicago's defense played quite well throughout that game. But I think this is going to be a close, gritty game that we might want to see high scoring, but I don't think it's going to be high scoring.
I want to talk about Caleb Williams just a little bit, and I want to preface this by saying it's week one, first of all, and second of all, Brian Flores might have the worst defense to go up against if you are a young quarterback. So I want to get those two things out of the way before I talk about Caleb. Um, I was not encouraged by what I saw when I went back and watched that game from Caleb Williams. I think you look at the first drive and it was genuinely great. We talked about before we got on this podcast how he was just surgical. Everything looked perfect in that first drive. It looked like Ben Johnson had fixed the Chicago Bears essentially. Um, After that moment, it really was never the same in this game. They put up, I think, 24 total points, seven of which came from a pick six, but there were just so many errors from Caleb Williams in terms of his accuracy. He had more than a few sprays. He also, there were many times where Ben Johnson had schemed up a receiver, maybe like a crossing route. There was one, I believe it was in the third quarter, that Ben Johnson had kind of schemed up where Adunze lined up in the slot. The Vikings were lined up in kind of a zone coverage, and the play was designed to find Adunze on a crosser. He was the first read. Caleb Williams could have thrown him open, and he just like didn't. I think it ended up in like a scramble or something. There were so many instances at which there was a schemed route that was open, and Caleb Williams just did not throw it for whatever reason. I don't know if he thought the defense was maybe doing something different. It is Brian Flores, so maybe he was just assuming it was a little bit more tricky than it actually was. But he honestly, to me, looked like year 2 or 3 Justin Fields in a way where he would bail on a pocket that was, somewhat clean. It was clean enough to deliver whatever the intended first read was that was open. It happened several times throughout. I'll narrow it down to the second half in particular, but it reminded me a lot of Justin Fields, a little bit of like Kyler Murray in there too. Um, he's going to have to improve. And I know that we talked kind of at length before the season started that, the Bears might take a little bit to kind of get settled in. It's a new system, new coach, rookie coach, and there's still a young quarterback, and it's going to be a work in progress. I did not anticipate those issues that I just talked about with Caleb Williams being a part of those growing pains. Um, he could very well come out against the Detroit Lions on Sunday and it won't even look like a problem. It could just be a one game Monday Night Football opening game of the year type of thing. But I was just very discouraged by what I saw on the rewatch.
I think the most discouraging thing is that these were self-inflicted wounds. A lot of the pressures were not. I don't want to say he created them, but he didn't have to run away or and then just continue to run. It reminded me of early in his career, Russell Wilson, like the bad parts where he would kind of create pressure for himself. But then at least Russ would find the open stuff. Russ is one of the better
Yeah.
scramble drill quarterbacks we've ever seen, or at least in my lifetime. Caleb Williams wasn't really doing that. It was he could see the receivers too. Like on the things you're referring to, there were three
Yeah.
or four of those where they were sitting in the zone over the middle. Like he's looking, or at least on the tape, it looks like he's looking at him, and he just chooses not to throw it. I think that's concerning. And then the misses are also concerning because that's just a physical. Do you change your throwing motion mid-season, or are you just a bad quarterback when it comes to precision and accuracy? I think those are concerning as well. A lot of them were in the red zone as well. Like the DJ Moore one's the big one down the left sideline, but he had one to, I believe it was Colston Loveland over the middle, and another one to DJ Moore over the middle, both in the red zone, and just missed them. I think those are concerning as well. But like you said, this is just week one. Brian Flores is a tough defensive coordinator to go against, and hopefully for the Bears' sake, they can bounce back. But if they don't, like we talked about, it might be Tyson Bagent time, like maybe after the bye week or something like that.
So I just want to kind of go over what I was talking about with this like crosser from Adunze. If you're watching live on Twitter or YouTube, you can see it on your screen, but I'll just have to describe it again if you're listening to it after the fact, this podcast. But you can see it's shotgun formation from Caleb here. He's going to snap the ball. You're going to see Adunze kind of come into this middle of the field area, and Caleb's going to look directly at him. It's the first read. He's looking directly at the area at which he should throw the ball, and he doesn't. Even though you've got Adunze right there, he gets pressured eventually, but it's still something that he has to kind of step into and deliver a throw, which would have been a first down in this scenario. So I just wanted to cover that before we moved on, but. I was just discouraged by him, and I think the Ben Johnson stuff is like completely fine. I think he schemed up so many things that were open throughout this game, and it was just kind of disheartening to see a lot of just missed opportunities from the quarterback.
It's an interesting case study because we're going to see Jared Goff in this game, and he really thrived in Ben Johnson's system because he's a point and shoot kind of guy. Not to diminish his ability, Jared Goff was a number one overall pick. He obviously has talent, but within the Ben Johnson system, that's what it required. I think what Caleb Williams, his strengths and his high ceiling, being able to create, may not mesh well particularly with the Ben Johnson system where he wants to make it incredibly quarterback friendly. But if the quarterback doesn't make it friendly on himself, I think that's where the you see the misses like this and the sprays and stuff like that.
I think other than kind of the Caleb Williams question, I the Bears defense I think was genuinely great the first three
Mhm.
quarters of the game against
Even
Minnesota.
without Jalen Johnson, I think we should note.
And without Jalen Johnson, and we talked about on our season predictions episode the Bears having question marks at both coordinator positions because we just haven't seen them before. And that could not have looked more the case against Green Bay in week one. It looked like two different play callers that were just trying to figure things out. And I think um, it's gonna still be the case in week two against Chicago, but you don't have to go against Matt LaFleur. I know Ben Johnson's still like an incredible play caller, but um, Matt LaFleur, I think, more proven, more experienced. And I think the defense is a step down from what Green Bay is as well. So I think that the Bears are going to win this game. I don't think they cover the 5.5 margin that is the current betting spread.
Do you mean the Lions are gonna win this game?
Yeah,
As
yeah, the
they're the
Lions. Yeah.
okay, yeah. I think I'm with you there, but I do think it's gonna be a closer game or a lower scoring game than people want it to be when you see Ben Johnson and the Lions.
Moving on to, I would consider this the game of the week. It's the second game I want to talk about. Thursday night football, the game tomorrow night. We're recording this on Wednesday evening. It is the Washington Commanders at the Green Bay Packers, who are favored by 3.5. Thursday night football, it's gotten a lot better over the past few years. They've put a lot more, I would say, just good games on early in the season. And this is got a lot of potential to be one of the better kind of matchups so far. Micah Parsons, it is his first time playing in prime time since joining the Green Bay Packers. I really, really liked what I saw on rewatch from Lucas Van Ness. Rashawn Gary also looked significantly better as the team's second edge rusher rather than being the primary guy. Uh, this is a group that's going to go up against what I consider to be a pretty shaky offensive line. You have a rookie right tackle, and um, Tunsil didn't look like the best in the world in week one against the Giants. I know that defensive line is pretty sick too, but that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch, those two lines going up against each other. And then you obviously have the quarterback matchup, the two guys that I would consider to be the most talented in all of the NFC between Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love. I just think that you have so many different aspects of this game that are going to be fun to watch.
I think you can throw a healthy Dak Prescott into that conversation as well, but
For sure.
certainly
Yeah.
2 of the top 3, I would agree. The point that you made about Thursday night football being much better, I think, Thursday and Monday night kinda swapped their products there because for a while, Monday night was really, really good, but I think since Amazon took over Thursday, there's been a push there. Makes me
Yeah.
miss the classic, like, we'd get 16 weeks of the Jaguars versus the Browns or something on Thursday with the color rushes, but we're going to get an actual, or we hope to get an actual good game this Thursday tomorrow. Micah Parsons played against Jaden Daniels, I think one time last year. I think they played another time when Parsons was out. So there's some familiarity there. What I'm interested in this game is going to be the Packers offense against the Washington defense and how they can kind of take advantage of a defense that isn't among the league best, I'll say. The Giants weren't able to take advantage of it mainly because Russ was just missing and taking underneath stuff and stuff like that. I think there's a real opportunity for Matthew Golden to have a breakout game against a I don't want to say shaky, but maybe unproven secondary in Washington. I think they didn't involve him a ton in week one. And if they can get him to be the focal point of that offense, the Packers can really see just how good the team can be.
Quick question for you. Do you know who led the NFL in pressures in week one?
Uh, hmm, not a Carolina Panther. I'm gonna go with Lucas Van Ness.
It is Durant's Armstrong.
Okay, with
He had
Washington.
nine. Yeah, he had nine pressures. So he looked good in week one. I'm not sure he'll replicate that, especially against, I would say, like a significantly better offensive line. Like the Giants' O line was terrible. It made the Washington defensive front seven genuinely look like a top five unit, which I would be shocked if that were if it maintained itself over the season. Um, yeah, I am going to be tuned in to see Jaden Daniels on one side, Jordan Love on the other. I'm hoping that we get just a full game, 4 quarters of elite quarterback play with talent kind of littered throughout. I really want to see Matthew Golden succeed. He only played, I want to say, 60% of the snaps for Green Bay in week one. I think only had 2 catches or something like that. So I'm hoping he can get a little bit more rhythm. All the accounts out of training camp was that he was the main pass catcher in that offense, which did not come to fruition in week one. But here's hoping that can kind of change.
Yeah, and I wonder how much Micah Parsons is going to see the field. Obviously, it was a limited package in week one, but being on a short week, I don't know if they're going to ramp him up so much. But I think he's going to be the focal point or X factor for me against the Washington offensive line that, again, doesn't inspire a ton of confidence.
So moving on to your third game, we have a Super Bowl rematch.
Yeah, I had to do it, and before recording, I thanked you for leaving this one open for me. Just on paper, this has to be the most interesting game of the week, just because it's a rematch of the Super Bowl. The last thing we saw before Week 1 was Philly just annihilating the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think you could say that Kansas City is slightly better just by virtue of a free agency and a draft, but they're also without Rasheed Rice and Xavier Worthy. So and we hope Philly's going to have Jalen Carter for the whole game. Don't know if he'll have any more pregame antics or anything, but I want to see how the Andy Reid offense can go against what I think is a pretty good Philadelphia defense, especially if they don't have or we know that they don't have their top two pass catchers. How much Mahomes magic are they going to need in order to have a chance to win this game? Philadelphia is favored by 1.5. The game is in Kansas City, but I think just from a talent standpoint, Philly's the clear better team here.
I think Worthy is questionable, but I would be pretty shocked if he played based off of the let's just call it lack of updates around him. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith were like kind of just non-existent in that season opener against Dallas. I really think that with how the Chargers were able to take advantage of the Chiefs' passing defense, you're gonna try. I think the Eagles are going to try and do a similar thing. Obviously, you have two of the better boundary receivers in the NFL between AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Spagnuolo really shut down the run game against LA, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to do that against a team like the Eagles, where you have Jalen Hurts, you have Saquon Barkley. Um, I just come back and it kind of it looks like a ball don't lie game to me, where it's close. These are going to be two really good teams this year. It's hard to imagine Kansas City starting their season 0-2, but I think the talent difference between these two teams is so great. We talk all the time about how the Chiefs have just kind of aged themselves, maybe not out of a Super Bowl window, but definitely out of what their peak was when you had prime Mahomes. He's still in his prime, but prime Travis Kelsey, prime Chris Jones, and so much surrounding talent. I think it's kind of been whittled down just a little bit. And I think the inside of this interior offensive line is kind of bad for Kansas City. Like, I think it's Kingsley Suamataia has started at left guard, and I don't know how closely you were paying attention to that game, but Tyir Tart was like a game wrecker for the LA Chargers, and the Eagles have maybe one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL, and Jalen Carter, who we haven't seen much of, but I think it's a pretty significant mismatch.
Yeah, Jalen Carter coming off of 31 weeks of rest is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Jordan Davis, his counterpart, the other Georgia defensive lineman, I thought had a decent game against Dallas, especially after struggling in his first couple of seasons in the league. That's a mismatch, like you said. Taylor Tart was destroying them, so I can only imagine what those two are going to do. And then the Chargers as well were able to get all of their receivers involved, including but not limited to Lad McConkey. Like Keenan Allen was putting up numbers. Quentin Johnston scored twice. So if the Chiefs had trouble with those guys, how are they going to cover AJ Brown and Devontae Smith? I know they only had maybe 3 combined catches, but I think that was part of the plan. I think the Cowboys were just willing to let Jalen Hurts scramble for yards. I don't think Steve Spagnuolo is going to do that. So if they had trouble against LA, I think they're going to have trouble against the Philadelphia receivers as well.
It's going to be tough for them to slow Philly down. I'm going to take Philly on the points here. I think that they're going to win by more than 2 points. I just, again, it comes down to the talent for me, and I don't think Kansas City is necessarily fixed the mismatches that Philadelphia has.
And if Kansas City loses this, I'm going to pick Philadelphia as well. If they lose this, they have the New York Giants next week. I think that's Monday night. That's either Sunday or Monday Night Football. But then
Great.
they either host or go to Baltimore in Week 4. So a pretty daunting start to the schedule if they're not able to rattle off a couple wins, and they just need wins if they want to be in contention for the division, especially now that the Chargers and well everybody's 1-0 in the division other than the Chiefs.
I cannot believe they're putting the Giants on Sunday Night Football. I cannot believe that. That sucks. I didn't realize that was the week.
That's that big market push.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. The last game that we're going to talk about is one of the 2 Monday night games, actually. It is the Los Angeles Chargers at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chargers favored by 3.5 points on the road here. Geno Smith looked incredible against New England, against a defense that many people consider to be the most improved unit in the NFL from 2024 to 2025 based off of the offseason moves. They added Carlton Davis. They added Rob Spillane, obviously Milton Williams. Raiders just kind of threw the ball all over them. Jacoby Myers looked good. Brock Bowers looked good. Ashton Jeanty really wasn't even a factor in that game. And I know he scored a touchdown, but really he averaged like, I don't know, 1.5 yards per carry, if that. But the LA Chargers obviously took care of business against the Kansas City Chiefs in Brazil last Friday. Justin Herbert looked incredible. I think this is just going to be a really fun game between 2 quarterbacks that can throw the ball all over the yard. I already mentioned Taylor Tart. He looked like a monster against the Chiefs offensive line. This Raiders interior offensive line, I like Jackson Powers Johnson. It's not a very talented unit outside of that. So if Taylor Tart, if this like progression is real, I wonder if we see him maybe do the same thing. Maybe not quite to the extent that he did against Kansas City, but just be a force on the interior. So you have that, and I just love that we get to watch both rookie first-round running backs, Amari and Hampton for the Chargers, Ashton Jeanty for the Raiders, play against each other. That's just going to be a really fun matchup, and for it to be in prime time is really sick.
I hope this one is high scoring. I think the Raiders had the potential to score more. Brock Bowers gets hurt, and then they kind of just slowed down toward the end of the game there. But they certainly have the tools to do so. From everything I've seen, I think Brock Bowers is going to play it this week, or he's like pushing to play it this week. So
He
hopefully we
better
get
for the sake
more.
of my fantasy team.
One of your 11 teams, is he on one of just one, maybe more than one?
Just one. Just one.
Just one? Gotcha. But he's incredible already. I think he's the best tight end in the league already. But I'd like to see him and Ashton Jeanty reach their full potential on the field at the same time. That's going to be a big thing for me as Chip Kelly is kind of getting back into the NFL calling plays. I thought Geno looked really good. Obviously, Justin Herbert looked really, really good in that game on last Friday. So hopefully we get a shootout. Like you said, I think it's going to be interesting if the Chargers defense can replicate what they did against the Chiefs. Tyre Tart isn't necessarily a world beater, but if he can play like this or play like he did on Friday, I think he is going to have an impact against that Raiders offensive line. I want to look at the Raiders defense for a second because I know that the Patriots aren't a very good team, or they weren't a very good team last year, but I didn't think Drake May played particularly well. And I think the defense had a little bit to do with that, especially when the Patriots brought in so many weapons on offense. They weren't really able to move the ball consistently. I don't think the Raiders defense is for real. I want to preface it by saying that. But if they can be like a top 20 unit, I think that's going to go a long way. And I think the Chargers are like the perfect early season test for that unit to see if they're going to be good enough to complement all the new pieces on offense.
That Raiders defensive depth chart is not the best. They have Devin White starting. We have Steve's favorite corner at Darian Porter is the number one corner on the Raiders depth chart. Obviously, you have Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz is really cool too. But outside of those two guys, it's like a bunch of, let's call it flyers on Landon Roberts, Jeremy Chin, Eric Stokes. It's kind of scary. A lot of the players that they have playing very significant roles. I think the Chargers should win this game, and they should win pretty handily just based off of the depth on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball as compared to the Raiders. But I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a field goal type of game, but I am going to take the Chargers.
I'm going to take the Chargers as well, but they still haven't proven to me that they aren't not the Chargers, if that makes sense. Like they need to have a lot of good luck go their way before I believe that they're just going to choke games away like they have throughout like the last 20 years. Like I could see them having a weird fumble or something at the end. But I think just based on talent alone, you're right. I think the Chargers should get a road win. I don't know if game one was considered a road game for the Chargers. I don't remember who the home team was technically in that. But if they're able to get a win, that's 2-0 in the division really, really quick.
Yeah, it was the ninth home game for the LA Chargers, which sucks that
Okay.
they had to use it against a divisional opponent, but still.
Yeah, still a good win, and even better if they get two.
So with that, we're going to get to our last segment. Grade that take. Um, let's go ahead and get to your first take, Jacob.
I've been gassing up Aaron Rodgers all week since that performance, and he's going to have another 3 touchdown game. That Seattle defensive line is good. All right, I like Ernest Jones, the linebacker. I like Devon Witherspoon, but every time I see Reek Woolen in a highlight, it's him doing something poor. And then this last week was just the latest incident of that. Brock Purdy threw up like a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit to the back of the end zone, and Tariq Woolen had it, but got his chain snatched by I think Jake Tonjes is how you say his last name, the backup tight end after George Kittle got hurt. I think Rodgers can take advantage of that secondary. I think this is a very good opportunity for DK Metcalf to have a revenge game after they didn't give him the extension he wanted and they replaced him with Cooper Kupp. Rodgers also had the quickest time to throw in the league in week one. And I think that if Arthur Smith's system continues to be based around the quick game, they can mitigate a lot of the pressure that Seattle's able to provide. And then my last note is Seattle's run defense is pretty good. And with the lack of star running back power in Pittsburgh, I think they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. So I think we're going to end up getting 3 touchdowns from Rodgers, probably passing touchdowns. I don't foresee him running the ball in, but 3 is where I'm planting my flag at.
You mentioned that touchdown to, I'm just going to say it's the third or fourth string tight end for the San Francisco 49ers. It looked like one of those plays in Madden where you just kind of scramble around and then throw it up, and then
Mhm.
somehow, some way, your guy comes up with it. Yeah, I think that, another 3 touchdown game for Rodgers. I think I'm just higher on the Seattle Seahawks defense than you are. I really like Mike McDonald, even with the struggles that this defense had with Reek Woolen, with some of the other players, they still only gave up 17 points to the San Francisco 49ers. And I think that the Steelers offense is just a worse unit than what the 49ers offense had, at least last week. This week is a different story. But last week they had George Kittle for a quarter, and then they had Brock Purdy still. But yeah, I I'm gonna grade this one a C minus, just because I think that Rodgers looked genuinely unexpectedly good to me. I was very, very surprised that this Steelers offense was like fun to watch. DK Metcalf looked great in an Arthur Smith system that requires a lot of movement, that requires having some ability after the catch. He looked great in that sort of thing. And you mentioned Rodgers, like he was throwing off of his Achilles heel that he really struggled with just a season ago. So I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with this take, just because I'm a lot higher on the talent of the Seattle Seahawks defense.
I think that's a valid point, but when you mentioned San Francisco's offense compared to Pittsburgh's offense, I think that by the end of that game, Pittsburgh's offense is going to be a lot better because you had Jawan Jennings injured, Purdy injured pretty early in that game. Kittle barely played. They had McCaffrey, and he's a very good player. But I think by the end of that game, Seattle was playing against not very good offensive weapons, I'll say, and an offensive line that isn't my favorite in San Francisco. I think Seattle or Pittsburgh, excuse me, across the board is probably going to be better than the end of game, or we'll say like last quarter San Francisco unit that was out there.
Colt McKivitz, by the way, good enough to get a 3-year extension. So
That's like a Nick Casario extension, as we
yeah,
call
that
it, with the
was
2 point conversion.
I was kind of surprised when that notification hit. But I do want to mention, just since we talked about Seattle, I think JSN may have taken another step based off of what he was able to do in game one. Like he looked just incredible. Some of the routes that he had genuinely was doing everything for that Seattle offense. The run game wasn't particularly efficient. Kenny Walker didn't look very good. But JSN looked like an all pro level receiver.
Absolutely, and he kind of has to be for them, right? Because the rest of the weapons did not inspire confidence, I think is a polite way to put it.
So my first take that I have here today is I think the Chiefs start 0-2. I think they're going to lose to the Eagles on Sunday. Worthy is likely to be out, and I think one of the biggest points that you could kind of take away from that Friday night game against LA is that Tyquan Thornton is not Xavier Worthy. Hollywood Brown is not Xavier Worthy, nor is he Rishi Rice. There was a clear lack of chemistry. There were so many missed deep shots. They hit on one, which was like cool, I guess, but I just still think Worthy is so much more of an effective player for this offense. Philly's offense is, I think, going to be better than maybe what they showed on opening night. I think AJ Brown too. He had, I think, one catch for like 8 yards on opening night. I just think that he matches up so well against this defense. And I mentioned it earlier. I know we've kind of talked about this game at length already, so we can keep this one short. But it just to me feels like a ball don't lie type of game where the talent's just going to win out.
I'm gonna say A. The only thing that's not making it an A plus is I can't fully count the Chiefs out of anything as long as Mahomes is there. But A, I agree with everything you're saying. AJ Brown plays particularly well against the Chiefs. So does Devontae Smith. He's been very good in both Super Bowl games that they've played against each other. Like you said, the talent level is just different. I was thinking to myself, like maybe the Chiefs have the rest advantage, right? Because they played on Friday. The Eagles played on Thursday. So like everything seems to be going in their favor. I think the Eagles are going to take it, and the noise that I'm a big proponent of in the offseason about the Chiefs maybe starting slow or not winning the division. I think that's going to get louder if they start 0-2.
What is your second take?
So another AFC playoff team, I think is going to drop to 0-2 this week. That is the Houston Texans. I know that they didn't go up against world beaters with the LA Rams, but I thought that all the concerns we had about Houston in the offseason really came to light in that game. The offensive line didn't impress me. CJ Stroud didn't play well, even when the offensive line was good. There were moments, but they didn't utilize Nico Collins, I think, to the fullest extent. The new play caller doesn't, it's his first game, so there is a period of growth there, but he didn't look as a good a play caller as you would want for a Texans team that's striving to win the division again. And they're going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the other Monday Night Football game. I think this is the first of the two games, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe it is in Tampa Bay. But nevertheless, it's on Monday. I think the Tampa Bay offense is potentially better than what we see from the Rams. Obviously, Puka Nakua is better than any player on Tampa Bay's roster or on their offense, but I think the Buccaneers offense is much more put together. I think Emeka Egbuka, the rookie receiver, was a star in game one, and I think he can continue to have an early season breakout. And just overall, I think the talent and the experience with Tampa Bay are going to outweigh what Houston has on defense, and I think Houston will drop to 0-2.
I really like this take. I think that Houston, maybe we overlooked the offensive infrastructure issues that Houston really has because their starting running back is Nick Chubb, who is old. He's been injured quite a bit over the past few years. You combine that with an offensive line whose best player is Titus Howard. That's not good. That's really not good. Tampa Bay, I have reservations based off of how they played week one, and I really don't want to extrapolate too much based off of that. But I think the offense, you're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. But Emeka Ibuka looks phenomenal. Mike Evans still looks like he's going to be a threat in this offense. He's, I think, on an expiring contract, actually. But yeah, I just think that the talent favors Tampa Bay in this game. I think that they're going to get out to a 2-0 start. Um, Stroud, we'll see. The problem with this team is that they have so many brand new pieces on their offense. Outside of Nico Collins, who did have a lot in the way of injuries last year, the starting skill position players, other than Collins and Dalton Schultz, are completely new. You have Christian Kirk, you have Jaden Higgins, you have Jalen Knoll as well. So there's a lot of like shiny new receivers, but oftentimes it just takes a while for when you have a lot of turnover for those guys to mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and agree with you. I think Houston drops to 0-2. I think Ibuka has another, you could call last week a breakout performance, but I think he's going to continue to build off of that.
And I think the worst thing I foresee in all of this is the run defense for Tampa Bay is always going to be good if Vita Vea is
Yeah.
there. And the like you mentioned, the Texans run game isn't necessarily the best right now. It's Nick Chubb. I don't know if Woody Marks, the rookie running back, even was on the field this past week. So their run game isn't great, and I think it's going to force Stroud into passing situations, which means that offensive line is going to have to hold up against Todd Bowles, who knows when to send blitzes. So I think it's just a bad matchup in general. And I think Tampa Bay as a whole is probably a little bit more talented and a little bit more experienced.
I, yeah, I mean, Vita Vea, since coming into the league, there's a clear point at which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers became just a consistent top 10 running defense, and that's like as soon as Vita Vea joined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So uh, I I just think it's going to be really hard to beat Tampa. I struggle with the Woody Marks thing because he is an older rookie running back. They spent a third round pick to get him. In theory, he should probably already be better than Nick Chubb, but if he didn't win the battle in camp, then it might just like he might have just been a miss, to be honest, which sucks. I still have hope that he can find a way to contribute in this offense, but it's kind of scary if he's not getting reps over current day Nick Chubb. So, with that, we're going to move to my last take. I think Drake May leads the NFL in passing yards for week two. Um, I have been a pretty staunch believer in Drake May's talent ever since he was a redshirt freshman at UNC. And the Dolphins just happened to make Daniel Jones look like prime Tom Brady. So they didn't get much pass rush. They couldn't really contend in any meaningful way in the trenches. And I think this one could get ugly once again. Patriots don't really have much in terms of pass catchers. I want to see Kyle Williams maybe get a little bit more involved. I think he was banged up a little bit in training camp. Stephon Diggs only ran like a handful of routes, but they were intentional in getting Stephon Diggs the ball. Kayshawn Booty, what can you do for me? But I think when you have a quarterback this talented, when you have arguably the worst secondary in the league, a team with all time bad vibes, you still have Mike McDaniel doing these weird gimmicks and press conferences. Um, I just think that it's set up for Drake May to really excel in a week two against the Dolphins.
I think I'm gonna give this one a B plus. I'm looking at all the games right now, trying to figure out who has a more favorable passing game script. My hesitation is that I don't think the Dolphins are gonna score a lot, and that's not gonna put Drake May in a lot of passing situations. Um, Maybe like Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence with those two teams might be a big passing week for them. Michael Penix maybe against the Vikings because I don't think they're going to be able to run super effectively. But Drake May certainly I think is going to be, or when I'm looking at all these matchups, is going to be one of the top 3 or 4 passing guys this week. So I'll give that one a B, or what did I say, B plus? Just because I think there's opportunity to do so. I also have hesitations about the weapons with that team. I know you rattled them off, and I think that there are a lot of like B and C receivers in that group. Hopefully, one of them can take the step to being that true wide receiver one. But I think he has an opportunity for a lot of points this week because that Dolphins team was just horrific. We talked about on Monday how they have so much investment in that defensive front and still were not able to generate pressure against, I think, a decent performance from a Colts offensive line. And that Colts offensive line is probably going to be better than the Patriots offensive line, but still, I have a lot of major questions about that Dolphins defense as a whole. So I could see this happening for sure.
So with that, I think we're going to get out of here. We gave some takes. We talked about the 2-point conversions, top 10 teams for week two, and we talked about a lot of games. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we get out of here?
Maybe in the college world, just that Georgia and Tennessee is probably going to be the game of the week this week. I don't think that has super big draft implications as far as like big names like quarterbacks and stuff like that, but certainly a big game as far as SEC standings go. Oh, and we talked about USF and Miami. That has implications for guys like Carson Beck and Ruben Bain. So that's another good one to watch.
I'm actually more interested in that game than I
I am
am
as well.
the
Yeah.
SEC matchup. USF looks electric so far. But we're going to go ahead and get out of here. We will be back on Sunday night to kind of recap the happenings of week two in the NFL. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire. You can follow myself at dj.png, the show at 2p_conversion on Twitter. You can also subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can subscribe to the blog at 2pointconversion.com. Super easy, super simple. You can support all of the work that we're doing on the podcast in terms of a blog, in terms of breakdowns, everything. So we appreciate everybody for listening today, and we will be back